You know, one of the things that I'm really excited about in terms of Venture Church Network is our focus on the gospel. I think we can all agree it is the power of God to salvation, and we know that it's the doorway that gets us into the family of God. We also know that it's a message we ought to communicate to people. But sometimes we struggle with that, and we're not quite sure how that comes about. And I want to remind you that I think one of the things that we can do that helps empower the gospel in our own life is to preach it to ourselves every single day. You know, I think of Philippians 2, and when I think about the gospel and what Jesus demonstrated in Philippians 2, is three things. One is the incarnation. He did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped. In other words, he emptied himself. He surrendered all the benefits and privileges and rights and freedoms that he had enjoyed with the Godhead for all of eternity. And that's really the beginning of the gospel. In American Christianity, that's hard for us because we like our rights and our privileges. And yet Jesus demonstrates that for us, if we preach the gospel to ourselves every day, it begins by surrendering all of our rights and freedoms and privileges and entitlements to God, so that we can then step into the role of a servant, one who has given up a self-directed, self-sufficient life, and we are committed, like Jesus was, to living out this mission as an ambassador for the gospel and for God. Obviously with Jesus, he made the ultimate sacrifice, but in order for the gospel to go out, we're going to have to make sacrifices too and be obedient to the Father in getting there. And those three things, I think, is what it means to preach the gospel to ourselves. That we have to surrender our rights, we have to become servants and ambassadors for God, and we need to be obedient even if it means making great sacrifices. Because when we preach the gospel to ourselves, we never get above it. You know, the danger of looking at the gospel as just a doorway to get into heaven and something we proclaim to them could easily tempt us to think that we don't need the gospel on a daily basis. But it keeps us humble. It helps us set our priorities in surrendering our rights. It helps give us purpose and direction by not living a self-directed life, but denying self and picking up our cross and following Christ. And the gospel will only infiltrate a dark world when we make the kind of sacrifices that God leads us to make so that people can hear this life-giving message of the gospel. If we don't preach the gospel to ourselves, I think we're in great danger of being comfortable in our own salvation. We can easily become critical and condemning of other people, and we lose our compassion to actually care for a lost world. Every morning I try to get up and rehearse the gospel in my own life, because it keeps me humble before my Savior, it keeps me motivated to how I'm supposed to live, and it keeps me focused on eternal things. And I encourage you in your journey, keep preaching the gospel to yourself every single day. It is vital if we're going to fulfill the mission of Christ and the gospel of Jesus Christ.